Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brandt, joined with my excellent co-host, friend, James. Of course, we are doing this on a Tuesday, James. It's wanted to do it
Yes.
yesterday. Double-edged sword. In one sense, I was glad yesterday was a holiday here for the kids, because I had a Super Bowl hangover. And in another way, I was like, Jesus, I give them, them sleepy gummies that they have.
Yeah. The
I
melatonin ones, right? Yeah.
Man, I'd be banning from Bill
It better
Cosby.
be the melatonin ones and not there's other sleepy gummies you gotta watch out today.
Well, someone said me like said there's some dangers in them. I'm like, by 7 o'clock at night, I'd be giving my kids a Bill Cosby brand. No, here's go sleep. Anything to get them up my head. But nonetheless, give us another day's room to discuss a win at the weekend. Doesn't feel like a win. And of course, a fast moving news cycle, James. More announcements today that there's staff
Yep.
layoffs. Uh, Some hint indication from Gary Neville that there's player unrest over system formation. We'll discuss that. I want to ask you about Kabi Mainu because he
Mm,
looks a little bit lost
yeah.
in this system and looks a little bit uncertain. And obviously, Dorgu, Dennis
Mm,
Law had his funeral, of course, yesterday, and
yes.
one or two other discussions. So, we'll not spend too much time, James, talking about the weekend since we're a few days removed from it. But any observations you feel are relevant?
I mean, a few things I think, obviously, for United it was I think we have all made some interest had some interesting shock, a little bit of surprises. How did you put it on Twitter? It's shitting your pants and changing your shirt. The
Mm-hmm.
When we watched on Friday when Dorgu comes in as a left wing back,
Mm-hmm.
targeting left wing backs, talking about left wing backs, looking at other left wing backs, signed Dorgu for a left wing back, and then he comes in and plays on the right. It's one of those things that as a United fan, we sit there and we go, are we like in a fucking
Yeah,
experiment here?
like, what?
Like, is
No
this is
fucking
this
way.
an
Like someone just, I'm go. Thank God we're going to see a left. No way. No way. I'm like, this is torture. Like this is like slow drip torture. I'm like, we said anyway. Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, and no, but it is. It's like we're in an experiment. Like, that we're in this experiment of like how much shit can we take? That just. But anyway, it's fine. I don't want to go too on it, man.
Mm,
Because I like Emram a lot. I also think Emram will make mistakes 2.5 months into
of
the job.
course.
I think that's one of them for sure, and hopefully he'll rectify it pretty quickly because I think he'll have to recognize. Um, Anyway, we can all sit there with our opinions on starting lineups, things like that, and try to coach the coach and all of that. But it was funny. That being said, I thought Dorgu, just as a positive on that, I thought he was quite good for coming in
Mm-hmm.
right off the bat. He
Mm-hmm.
shows intensity. You can see why they signed him. He's bigger. He looks bigger than I thought he was. I knew he was decently sized, but he actually looks quite big. And United is a bit of a small team. It's sort of something that goes under the radar a little. They're kind of small. They've been small for a while. He's a big guy, actually, quite fast, quite quick. You can see why they wanted him. I think there was positives to see that in his first 45 minutes. I think it's also important to note he wasn't subbed off at 45 minutes because he played poorly or anything. It was just the plan to play 45 minutes. I think it was actually, which I think it's nice when pundits, especially some former players, which topic I want to touch on later, like say positive things that are true that help, because I think it was Schmeichel who's Danish as well, right? Who specifically said that he was only supposed to play 45 and that was it. And I think that was a good thing to kind of be mentioned by someone rather than, the usual drama stirring it up like, he was yanked off at 45 minutes like you might see from from time and time again. That being said, United weren't particularly were pretty poor again for a lot of the game. um, it continues to be very stagnant. We kind of know the issues that they have on the pitch time and time again. They don't score goals. But I will say once again, it's sort of a funny thing with Amarim and where we're at right now that it feels like we're getting it wrong at the beginning. Once the subs were made, they looked like an entirely different team. All of a sudden, again, kind of got it right. I think Garnacho did really well again coming on. He's gotten a lot of praise in recent times. He wasn't sold in the window. Amarim praised him a lot for changing his attitude from what it was before, right? Implying that it was potentially an issue before, but that he's shown great application and all of that. And once again, he came on and did really well. I thought once again, Joshua Xerxes came on and was a game changer, scored the goal, of course, the first one to get United back into it. Um,
Mhm.
and I thought he did really well once again. And at this point, it's one of those ones where I start to question, should it might be better for all if he gets a start. And I have a lot of I'd like to give Xerxes more, maybe over credit him, because I still think it's absolutely absurd what happened not that long ago. Getting booed off at home after being at your club for a couple of months is a really, really wild thing to happen. And he's kind of come back from that and actually I think performed better since that point in time, and that's admirable from him.
Yeah.
Um, and then I mean, and United looked a lot better from that point on. They made a lot of chances from that point on. I think the end goal from Maguire being across the channel
Mm.
offside. Uh, fair enough. I still think
I mean,
United deserved
it
it.
was
It,
it's
it
a
was
really
pretty
bad
blatant.
decision.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was. Now, it's hard to it's hard to not feel slightly justice on that, given the insane number of calls we've had against us that have just been objectively wrong over the course of the season. So it's one of those things where it balances out. It's also one of those things that makes you think we can't really get rid of VAR if the refs are this fucking blind. But um,
But you
you
know
know,
what I will say in their slight defense, James? In their slight defense, the
yeah,
problem is that you see if you I've had this happen, right? Where I'll get into
yeah,
a car that doesn't have, the backup lights, the reverse lights, and I'm driving backwards and waiting for them to bleep
yeah,
because now becomes so dependent upon
yeah,
technology that
yes,
it changed how
yes,
I think. Now, if I didn't have the technology, I'm now becoming much more aware of
yeah,
things in my environment where I'm not, deferring to technology to do the thinking for me in some sense.
yep,
So I
yep.
think like it's very difficult to go from relying on technology to
Agreed.
then completely adapting a whole different sensitivity in your mindset to be aware of things that you have to catch that technology. I think you can get back there, but I think that you're going to see this happen when you have no VAR.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
it's kind
going to
of
be
like
getting
if you
in the long run.
you
Sorry.
ever travel, you rent a car and it doesn't have a
Hmm.
backup camera after if you've been using it, and you're like, I think I'm gonna hit absolutely everything. Like I feel blind, like I forgot how to drive when you're reversing when you're used to
Yeah,
using a backup camera because you just start and you're staring at the dash like, oh shit, I gotta sort this
I,
out here.
I go to places 30 times and I'm still relying on a map from my
Yeah.
GPS because I'm not focused on what street I'm turning off. I'm just oblivious to my environment because something else was doing the thinking for me. I mean, we relied on Thomas guides. Now I would
Yeah.
like, anyway. Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
No, no, I'm with you. I'm with you. So that's true. That is part of it. But anyway, that being said, I think I think it's still United deserved the win at the end of it. I mean, we're in this funny situation, right, where United are conceding very few shots per game. Actually, when you look at it, we're not getting battered. I mean, we all sat here last year. We know United were facing 20 plus shots a game, stuff like that. But we're in this kind of odd situation where United are now giving up very few chances, but for some reason we're conceding all of them, every single one, and it's a bit it can be a little bit frustrating, and so it definitely makes the games feel worse because we're also not scoring any at the same time on the other end. So we've seen it, and it's the type of thing we're just gonna have patience with. I mean, right or wrong, it's pretty obvious by this point in time that there's a pretty clear, like, I don't know what you call it. I want to get your thoughts on this. There's a pretty clear indication to pretty purposefully go away from trying to score goals quickly or hit on the counter, even when there's an opportunity. And one of the things that does bother me just a little bit, and I do understand it, and I want your thoughts on this, is I hate policing the crowd a little bit, but I don't love when our players are getting moans, groans, and boos 30 minutes into the game for passing it backwards because
Hmm.
I think it's intentional, and I understand that it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch for all of us. It's frustrating and it's slow and it's quite boring. Um, but they're obviously, Gallo gave an interview, and he said, "Look, we're using the games as training sessions," and that's a fact. I mean, someone put a thing together for me that says, you know, they've had on average 3 days, 3.11 days rests per fixture, which is not enough time to train, as anybody will know. And they've only had 2 occasions where they've had more than 3 days rest in between games. Now we're getting one this week. We get like 9 days, which is quite good, right? But Dallas said we're using the games as training sessions because we have to. And there's obviously a focus on, like it or not, playing out, getting it back to the back, maintaining possession, trying to push up the pitch in a very certain way rather than to go quickly. I don't think that's a permanent thing. I do think it's a learning curve thing. I understand why it's frustrating, but we're kind of, I don't know. I kind of need to, I guess I feel like fans, we kind of have to accept it or we're going to be really unhappy for the next 4 months,
Well,
honestly.
there's a couple of different points I want to address. So one, I don't
Yeah.
like what Dallas said because fans aren't being treated like it's a
I
training
understand
training
that. I
training match,
understand that.
right?
Yeah.
Fans are
That's
being
the other
treated.
side of the coin. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Secondly, no one
Yeah.
gets to put a Manchester United shirt on and not take the fixture and the responsibility to
Yeah.
play at the very highest level and get a result as the most important thing and say this is just a training exercise.
Yeah.
No game, no competitive fixture for Manchester United. Now it can also um, whilst that's certainly not the priority or certainly not the most important thing that it's a training session, it's also acting as a training session. But
Correct.
this
Yes.
is a competitive game of football. Okay,
Yeah.
you don't get training is for sharpening your getting prepared, working on strategy. We don't even do that much fitness because there's not that much time, and it's getting ready for the main event.
Yep.
Okay, and so you don't get to you make mistakes in training so you can perfect them in the main event. When you go into
Yep.
that arena, that's not a training session. And you have to play with responsibility
Yep.
so that you don't abdicate your responsibility and emancipate yourself from responsibility.
Yes.
Well, it's
Yes.
just a training session. So you expect no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And this is not, the Napoli Ultras, the Roma
Yeah.
Ultras.
Yep.
So if fans show their frustration with balls going backwards, you have to deal with that as a Man United player.
Mm.
This is not, getting pelted with coins or getting hit with a pig's head at the bar, because fans are paying customers, and
Mm-hmm.
when you have the ball in areas of the field that the opposition's letting you have it, and then you're trying to transition into areas where you can create goals where teams aren't going to let you have it, and you can't get there, you have to pass it back into a safe zone.
Yep.
That's frustrating. So when
Yeah.
you see United in games, James, there's no applied pressure, there's no consistent pressure, they're trying to score goals when they spend almost zero time in the opposition box. There's no
Yep.
there's no relentless pressure over 40 minutes where just
Yes.
hammer on you.
Yes.
They're relying on isolated one-off incidents to
Yep.
if that's a Premier League game, you need to draw this game one each,
Yeah.
right, against Leicester at home.
Yeah.
Now, that Manchester United team that played Leicester at home when Van Nistelrooy was there was significantly better than Amorim's the team that played against Leicester this time. Now, Amorim has to take some responsibility for this because to me, he's not in the realm of you are not responsible for what happens on the field. You are not responsible for the problems that led to why we see what we see, but there are some things that confuse me that I also see as an Ineos issue. If you've got players questioning formation and you've got players questioning systems and what have you, why are players not of the understanding that either I find a way to fit his system or I leave? But there
Mm.
is no ability for me to say, I am concerned about you. Ruben Amorim's the boss.
Yeah.
You need to be concerned about performing for him. And Ineos's job is to evaluate that squad and say, this squad and the players that we bought this summer, okay, were bought for a system okay, that we impose on a manager. They tell
Yeah.
Ten Hag, this is how we want to play. We're going to buy players that are suited to this, and we're going to find managers that are suited to our idea, that rather than the club once again completely changing their identity to suit a manager, which then, of course, leads to
Yeah.
impossible zero continuity.
Yeah.
So we're sitting here. They made decisions over the summer. They bear responsibility for any players that were signed over the summer. That was
Correct.
based
Yes.
on their concept. They bring in a manager in November, okay, with the concept of we want to play this system. If this team is completely incapable of playing the system without a complete overhaul, then you can't go in January and sign one player and get rid of three. You have to then decide, okay, if we bring in this manager, this is the plan to get him the players that he needs to make sure this is successful. Okay. And I look at this and go, I don't know if that really happened, because there's, first of all, okay, if you don't want to do a lot of business in January, okay, but look at the players that you have. Kobbie Mainoo looks lost in the system,
Mm-hmm.
and they
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to get a system that is, where his abilities and talent and position is, is an asset to this. And he's not the only player that looks lost. Rasmus Højlund, I actually feel for him. If you're a goal scorer and you're not getting chances, you drop deep to get involved. But you're doing lots of things you don't want to do, and eventually it's going to destroy your confidence. Eventually you're feeding a striker that's confidence is on the floor, and they look terrible. So I think he's much better than what he is, but he just can't get a striker into a game. Xerxes plays better because he drops deeper and he's more natural.
Yeah.
A lot of problems that are happening here should have been foreseen by any of us, James.
Yeah, and look, I think there is a balance here on a matter of that they quite literally couldn't do too much in January, one way or
But
another.
okay, so I just didn't quick. I don't mean but they should have known with what they have. Can these players easily adapt to? Because fine if you say no, but then you have to get rid of all of them.
Well, but the thing is, yeah, I mean, I agree, and that is part of the question, and I think that I mean,
Shouldn't these
obviously
World
this
Cups
is,
know the answer to that question before?
but maybe
Before
they
you
do.
hammer
You
into
know what I
it?
mean? Because like you take like Garnacho and Mainu situations, right? Like I like there's two questions to this when you take young players like Garnacho and Mainu, right? Garnacho, it's pretty obvious based on Amarim's comments, he wasn't fitting, and he was in essence then open for sale. And they were looking at players to buy in return for him if he were to leave in January. But then based on Amarim's comments, he's adjusted his game, he's adapted, he's improved.
Has he? Has
I
he?
think he has in the
Have you
last
seen
few games. Yeah.
playing recently anywhere near the levels he was playing under Ten Hag? Because I haven't.
Well, I think so. I mean, I think so. I think that because I don't think he'd been particularly good under Ten Hag for quite a while. Like he was when he first came in, but he did
I thought
have
he was
quite a.
excellent last season, mate. Didn't I think so?
No, I don't think so. I don't think
Okay, I
anybody
don't
was
know.
excellent last season. To be
I think
fair, like I
I
don't.
see the goal he scored. He got the Puskás Award, I think, didn't he? I think he did. But
Yeah,
I thought he had a lot of really good games on the left.
I thought he had
He
some
looked better
good
in our
games.
system,
Yes,
but I
but
don't. His finishing this season's been really poor, and that was under Ten Hag too.
yes.
Sorry, mate. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. No, and I think, but I think that like when you compare the first half of the season to like the last few games, he's even though he's still shooting
Mhm.
poorly, he's
Mhm.
actually creating goals, for others too. The pass in to he created the one that Xerxes scores. He creates the foul that led to the second goal, even though it was offside. He created a few others that we just barely missed as well. And
Mhm.
I've been fairly critical of him, but I think that where he has improved a lot is that even when he's not scoring, he's doing a lot. He is
Mhm.
creating for others in a way that maybe he wasn't before. And I think that has been an improvement, and I give him a lot of credit to that. And it's a balance. Like when you take Kobbie Mainoo, I think that is one of the
Mhm.
trickiest things here, right? Is that I think Mainoo suffers a little bit as a midfielder that some other players have. Just to not because of the same player, because he's not the same player. But Paul Pogba struggled with this a bit throughout most of
Mhm.
his career.
Yeah.
That because he didn't specialize, he was like, oh well, under Jose he played as a deep deep midfielder at
Mhm.
times, right? And he goes to France and he's playing as practically a second striker at times. And he plays at Juventus and he's playing with, you
Mhm.
know, Vidal and Marquisio, and it's like a totally different role, and it's a flat, and it's because he was never like, he's not a 10. It's like Bruno's a 10, like Pogba's a 10, and it wasn't he's a 6, like Matic was a 6. There's this lack of specialization. And Kobe Mainu, even though he's a different skill set than Pogba, I think it's kind of an issue with some of these younger players where it's harder to find what do they where do you put them, and a lot of systems have become, and I think this is a positive and a negative of football, is a lot of systems have become so specialized that from a positional standpoint, right, that it's hard for players who have not specialized. But he's very young, he's 19. And so I think we're with him, it's a both sides responsibility here, is that I think they got to pick a spot for him to kind of specialize in a little bit, or he's going to continue struggling with this in his career, because it does happen to a lot of players, especially I think midfielders, where they don't have a position and then they kind of bounce until they fit some random system that fits their position in. But it's enough of a talent that you want to get the most out of them, and you want to make it
Yeah.
work as
I think
well.
I think what happens when you're getting around 19, 20, Manu and Garnacho's age, your game is starting to transition from a hybrid amateur pro style to a totally effective pro style. And what I mean is, when
Yeah,
Ronaldo came to United, he did all these step overs, he did all this, he's a way player, and
yeah,
but the end product wasn't there. So United had to refine his game
yes,
in
yes,
a way that said, we can be much more efficient with the ball. You can have better outcomes. You don't need to do this. And then you start to change. This is the last stage of development in a player that's the hardest.
yeah,
So you get this adaptation from this young, youthful potential into now, you know, uh, refining and finessing your skills to
yeah.
fit a very
A role, right?
a
Like a
professional that produces how can I
yeah,
use this skill set in a way that produces
yeah,
results, right, an end product. So I think you have that adaptation. And look, I also think that there's some lessons that young players have to be taught about growth that have nothing to
yeah,
do with football. And that is, you're going to sit on the bench, and I want to
yeah,
see how you respond to adversity. Look, this is a really bad analogy, but let me use it for a second. My son's was on the bench. He's 18 for school. He's moaning, and he says to me, I'm better than this guy and that guy. And I said, your target is to be just 1% better than the worst guy. Now, you're on this bench, and there's two ways you can get off it. You can quit, or you can play better and get in a team. But whatever you do, it's a metaphor for life. You're confronted
yeah,
with a challenge, and you can complain that you're not being treated fairly and that you deserve to be there because you're
yep,
better than the worst guy. Or you can take it upon yourself to say, I'm going to get myself off this bench by getting on the field, not by getting out of the game and quitting. And so
yep,
young Garnacho and Manu, this is also about mental development. It's like, okay, I know you're angry, I know you're disappointed. How are you going to use that? Are you going to use it to improve, or are you going to use it as the self-destruct? This is also a test of who's around you and what type of, echo chamber you're living in.
yeah. Agreed. I definitely agree with that. Now, and look, obviously, just sort of a last point on that Leicester aspect, and that
Oh, sorry, man.
specifically, is that no, it's all good. It's all good. We've been broadening, which is fine. Is that, at the same time, it's very funny. Liverpool lose the same weekend to Plymouth. Now, obviously, they're doing so much better, but they lose to a team getting relegated from the championship. Okay, like hasn't have won 2 games in like 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
We knocked out Arsenal from the same competition. We've we won it last year during the worst season ever in the in United from domestically. So it's always funny with all that, how it works in football. But no doubt about it, United need to improve upon this. If we're going to be not stuck with, but really insistent on the system, then you got to improve. It's got to get better. And by the end of I know that people want to see more by now. I think we all want to see more. by now, even though it's for sure far away from an end product. And I think by the end of the season, people really will want to see more positive signs, to have a lot of faith in it moving forward. That being said, when you take things like players, whether they fit or not, or players, whether reports, things like that about players not fitting. One of the things that really bothers me about this in general, Phil, when people report it and talk about it, is we know how damaging it's been to certain people's
Mhm.
reputations. These
Mhm.
anonymous
Yeah.
generality reports like this. Some
Mhm.
players think they're not gonna that the formation's bad. So who does everyone's mind to? I can tell you, well, certain people's minds are gonna go to is the players that already have been pushed towards disliking, pushed towards targeting,
Mhm.
pushed towards, and it's
Yeah.
like, well, Rashford's not here. So I thought that was gonna stop all the leaks. That was gonna stop all, now I didn't think that, but that
No,
was,
I know
how
you're making a
people would
general
apply
point
it.
there.
Like, and it was 3 years ago. And it was like, oh, we had this under Ollie that was like, well, these players don't like this and that, and people were targeting Maguire with it. Well, Maguire's still here, so I'm guessing he's going to get targeted with it again, as being one of the only players still here. So it's going to be Maguire, except he's been starting every game and probably loves the formation because he's played at a three at the back his entire career practically, outside of United. And I think it's very dangerous. It's very damaging because it's just as easy to draw other conclusions. I could just as easily draw a conclusion and say, well, it's Kabi Menu who's not fitting into the formation, obviously. So he's the one complaining. And, you know, so now should United sell him if that's the case? But now is it selling an academy product? But is he, it's just very dangerous territory that this all ends up in with these things. And it's one of the things to me that makes it a really difficult environment, because I really, really don't like, as we've seen, I really don't like the environment around United, and how it turns to so much almost hatred for the players at the club. And I'm not absolving them of responsibility for play and performance and things like that, but we've seen how it becomes weaponized so easily, and it makes for a nearly impossible job for them to perform in, for people to perform. And that was sort of my point about the booze. It's just like, about a player. It's like a player does something, and then you compound it with these reports that are out there, and it's naturally people are going to narrow in on people and believe that they're right about it. And I don't know what the answer to it is, but I've always, I think you and I have on this podcast done, done a very often really refrained from saying anything like that. Some people don't like this. Some people are unhappy with this because of how dangerous it can be and what it implies, when you do that. It would be just as easy to write a story saying some players love the formation, and it would mean the same thing, and it's like, but it's not a story, you
Yeah.
know.
Here's
It
the thing.
bothers me. It's very odd.
There's a couple of things here. Where you stand on an issue all depends on where you're sitting, right?
Yeah.
So undoubtedly, the players will have their perspective and feel legitimately, that feels frustrated that certain
Sure.
factors are not being considered in the appraisal. The club will have their position, and the
Yep.
fans will have theirs. Typically, with human beings, when they form a belief about something, it's a top down. It's not. They don't form a belief as a result of a logical inference, extrapolation from evidence. We have form
Yep.
ideological beliefs. We oversimplify them. We look for one, demonic causal element when it's much more complex. But we form
Yes.
beliefs that then we exclude anything that contradicts that belief, and we look
Yep.
for things that confirm it, and it leads us to bad conclusions about why what's the subtle science, and what is the causal element. If we remove this will go away. We're just
Yep.
bogeyman. That's just that. We look for superheroes, and we just reduce it down to one singular thing when it's never that. I
Yeah.
mean, human behavior is simply impossible to define or predict. Right?
Yep.
More than 50% of the papers written in psychiatry are not repeatable. If you don't have a repeatable, testable, repeatable hypothesis, you don't have science. You can never ever scale environmental differences on people. So when compare this great guy, Xerxes to Holland to, Mbappe, okay, how have you factored in, applied a value and scaled all the environmental differences that are going to have a
Yep.
major impact on how that individual performs? If you can't do that, you don't have analogous data, you have nothing to make any objective. So this is just
Yep.
us in our primitive mind. You saw it at the weekend. This particular outlet, Euro can't pass a ball 5 yards. Now they're looking for a new target
Yeah.
to zero in on to build and feed negativity that has a fiscal payoff without any fear or any sense of moral, responsibility to
Yep.
another human being. If you're on the receiving end of that, if you're a player, you don't have a club that protects you. Fine if
Yep.
people on the outside want to attack you. You expect that. You expect to be attacked by your enemy, but you expect to be protected by the people
Yeah.
that you're playing for every week. What happened to Marcus Rashford with the Daily Mail and the Sun articles? If you don't have any type of uh, scaffolding and it's erected in such a way that says that is unacceptable, then you descend into getting to the absolute despicable disgrace of the Daily
Mm.
Mail. Marcus Rashford doesn't look happy enough, and he looks scruffy, he looks rough, he took his gloves off wrong, he didn't wear the right clothes. I mean, this is totally insane. Why doesn't this provoke a response from United?
Yes, I would
This is
agree. I do agree.
right. This is catnip to racists. This is despicable. And that is not acceptable. And then you're going into a football club where you're looking to fire people. Morale has to be on the floor.
Yeah.
You're just in demolition mode. You're not. How do you then create an environment that says, I want to give 100% for this employer? Instead, what you're telling everyone is, we're looking for ways to get rid of you. But I want you to go on that field and give me 200% for me. Human beings just don't work like that. And when you look at United on the pitch, there's no cohesion. When you have no cohesion, you have no force multiplier. So it
Yeah.
just looks lifeless, dead shape, because that's what the club still is right now. That's a reflection of what's going on inside. And I
Yeah.
don't know how you foster a collective commitment to a collective goal when the employer is not committed to you.
Yeah, and I think, obviously it's like there's a lot of stuff that has to happen, but they have to. I think where they are missing is on this point. Is that you have to make these cuts. You have to sack these people. You have to do these things. Fine, they have to happen. Fine, if we accept that, which I think does to some degree have to be accepted. But then you know and when you look at it, like the club has invited a lot of these snakes into the
Mhm,
house in the
mhm,
past,
100%.
that create this toxic atmosphere. And even if you weren't there when they did that, and even if the current regime's idea is to keep at arm's length from these people, which it is, I don't think it's enough. I do think they have to, just like they're correcting mistakes of the past with some of these things they don't want to do, that nobody likes with cuts and things like that. They didn't create those problems either, but they have to correct them. Well, this is another problem area that I think that they didn't create because they didn't invite these people in. They didn't create these relationships where people are getting and reporting these things about
Mhm,
players and foster all this. They didn't create the dressing room, rivalries and things that exist within it. They didn't do that, but they do have to do something about it. And I think that in a large degree, it's doing Amram a bit of a disservice that I think he might be struggling with a little bit, leaving him on his own to do it. He's got a strong personality and he's a strong individual, but I think he might be violating a little bit of his own um, beliefs already under some of the pressure of it, in terms of certain things that he said that he doesn't usually say, and certain things that he's commented on that he doesn't usually comment on. But nobody else is doing it, so it's a bit of a problem, when nobody else is doing it, when there's nothing else coming out, you know, and I've argued with you to the opposite, that they can't reply to every report and things like that. But I
mhm.
also
I agree on
would
that.
tend
That's
to
fair. You're
agree,
right.
yeah, but I would also tend to agree more and more. Like when I see things like today that come out, and I see these kind of talk, and I see all this, I look at, like, a lot of these guys, and I think it comes to the ex players as well. That there's many of them, like, Paul Scholes making a bunch comments on Lissandro Martinez and things like that, and Lissandro Martinez is, it's goes back at him on Instagram over these types of things. And I'm like, this just isn't a good atmosphere for this kind of stuff. And I want to give credit on one aspect, okay? Maybe I shouldn't. There's different views on this kind of things, but I take Rio Ferdinand for example,
Mm-hmm.
who has been at times a fairly contentious pundit, different reasons, things like that. But United recruited him on board to
Mhm.
help with getting Lenny Yoro into the club.
Mhm.
And I actually think it was a very smart move. One way or another, I think it was a very
Mhm.
smart move because I think Rio Ferdinand's actually been quite positive. And I think that it forced a little bit of maybe extra respect by maintaining a good relationship with him that that he's been more encouraging. He can't sit there. He got on the phone with Lenny Yoro and they made a video about it and then sit there on air and go, Lenny Yoro's shit, can't pass a ball 5 yards.
This is
You
why
know,
you don't get him involved.
you don't think
Okay.
so?
No, let me explain why I don't.
Yeah,
Whenever the whole story came out about Jude Bellingham
yeah,
and Fergie and John,
yeah,
this is
yeah,
gimmicky. Because if
yeah,
I was working with Lenny Euro, but like this guy doesn't work for the football club. The minute you walk in the door, your relationship with him is over. And I don't know how I can mentor you. Exceptional player, brilliant, all that
yeah,
there, right? But you're going to use Rio Ferdinand, and then you're going to not only credential and platform people that are already targeting him with,
yeah.
I mean, to
Well,
me,
no, no, I understand that, but
but let me just make one
yeah,
point on this, and
yeah,
then sorry, I don't know if you remember this, but when Varane came to United, he was getting slaughtered by the press.
yeah,
Ferguson came out with a expletive rant. Fuck
yeah,
you. He's a great player. You don't know what that was enough
yeah,
to
sure.
provoke Ferguson's rage. It wasn't need to be a statement. It didn't need to
You
be a
probably,
club.
yeah,
And he would ban you if you continued to create headlines or anything that had no journalistic merit. There's a standard of ethics that you
yeah,
have to meet. Lots of people who are independent media don't get credentialed because they're not considered legitimate journalists, but they have we've been held to a certain standard.
yeah,
Manchester United have been
yes,
never slow about coming at you and me with certain things to say, hey, that's not could you correct this? But yet you are going to then legitimize and credential people that have no journalistic integrity, no editorial integrity, no attempt to ever care about what's right. They only care about who's right. And that undoubtedly has a consequence and impediment to players
yes.
reaching their potential. There's definitely a very negative net cost to United players, especially young players, when these leeches scumbags build a cottage industry off abusing them.
Yeah, well, and I think essentially my point on it was that you should be able to, hold them to these standards
Yes.
because you should have the threat of complete cutting them off if they don't, and you should use it, willfully. And I agree with where it's been confusing is that I know that that standard exists. It's just not applied.
Mhm.
It's just not applied to everybody. It's just not out there. But they need to, And I'm not saying it's a fact. I'm just saying that I would suggest that perhaps they've asked for certain things in return when it comes to certain players or certain
Mhm.
ex media and pundits, which I think is fair to say. If you're going to be involved in anything on this, you better play nice. You better be respectful. You better do these things. But that has to be the case for everybody, quite honestly. It just does, and I think it's an under-identified problem, perhaps by some people, and I don't know why, but I think it is a near impossible atmosphere. I have never seen a fan base that hates its players the way that this does. I've never seen it in any sport anywhere
Well,
that gets drawn into this. That literally loathes
I
their own players. It baffles me, and we can say, but it's because they're not playing well or things like that. But I don't think that it would have been acceptable under
yeah,
anybody in the past. This
I,
types of thing.
I think James, there is definitely some type of distinction in that match going fans,
I'm
people
not
who,
meaning that really, by the
yeah,
way.
the people who
Yeah,
support the club,
yeah,
okay, they will vent their anger at players. They will certainly vent it, but they aren't, can have they aren't being, contaminated by financial incentive to.
correct. Yes,
So then you get people on the internet with different incentives, different motivations that have, that are saying things that in any other generation you would never hear about because they wouldn't be considered Manchester United fans. If you can support something more than the club, it's not the club you support, and that's okay. You're entitled to do that, but you're
yeah,
not entitled to have any legitimacy in the conversation or shape, any particular fan culture because you're not you're not a supporter
Yeah.
of the club. Some people support the team, some people support players. This is unfortunately the generation we live in as a result of how everything is being branded, commoditized.
Yeah.
But the problem is that all of that deluge of abuse
Yeah.
and the compound impact of that on a player, it's very difficult for them to decipher. And that would decimate a human's,
Yeah.
say, it would fill them full of anxiety, fear, and that as it would to anyone, and it just makes their development harder. Where it's like, I have a 18, about to turn 18, James, amazing kid, and I love him to death, but I think about Lenny Euro, who's my kid's age.
Yeah.
I mean, my kid he's an immature 18-year-old, and any mistake he makes, it's not out of malice, it's just out of like, and you're going to sit there as a fucking grown man
Yeah.
and legitimize that, and then complain about people not wanting to meet you, or come on podcast and complain about you being targeted.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, and you know that this is a discreet, like this is.
Yeah.
It also sends a message to the next younger generation that this is how you progress. The incentive of following, respect, integrity, just has no payoff. Just be a toxic piece of shit.
Yeah.
I'm
And
sorry,
that's what
that's
and
disgraceful.
I know, and that's what I mean when I say, fans. It's not actually, I'm not actually criticizing the fans. I'm talking about how it's being poisoned. The pool has been poisoned for,
Who
and it's been
uses bot farms, by
legitimized.
the way? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Artificial
No, but
inflated numbers through bot farms.
yeah,
Anyway, go
but
ahead.
it's been poisoned. It's like it's constantly being poisoned, and it's like it's natural for people to be influenced by these things, and all of that. It's like it just is what it is. But and I think that it is the club do need to step on it a bit more about this. I think they really do. I think it's reaching kind of a breaking point, because especially, what I would argue with this is that if you're going to sit there and say, we've accepted that we're going to be shit for a little while, and we're going to play bad football, and it's going to take time to transition into it, and we didn't have the money to spend in January, and we have to make all these changes. Well, if you're going to say that that's the case, and expect, then you have to be willing to step in and protect the players from it, because it's going to get brutal. I mean, it will get brutal for them, these situations, that it will get brutal for people, and there's going to be a lot of people, who are absolutely loving it, because it's how they make their money.
Yeah,
For when things are bad, that's when they make their money, and it's like, there's a whole industry is built on that, essentially. And you got to be able to do something about it, because otherwise I think it's throwing people, these guys into the wolves, and it's just going to compound the issue, for everybody. And it just it bothers me, and the other aspect that bothers me, and I think this is just in general, is the unspecificity. When you're reporting negative things, it's like, am I saying it's better for someone to write a story? I'm not saying this isn't the name. It's not a name, but is it better for someone to write a story? Diogo Dallo doesn't feel the formation suits United, right? Or to write, some players feel the formation doesn't suit United. It there's no value, frankly, in either of those. But leaving it in general means it could be anybody, and I just, and I know what's going to happen from this, and it's already, it's already videos. There's already more articles. There's more already, just more shit, and you know exactly where it's going to go into. And
this is why I sort of recoil against people of my age
yeah,
saying things like the younger generation is weak. First
yeah,
of all, this idea that you can build mental resilience or mental strength by continuously exposing people to negative, uncomfortable experiences is total bullshit.
yeah,
No one even knows what mental strength is or mental resilience or how one acquires it. And if that was true, that negative experience, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Someone explained to me how veterans are blowing their head off in
yeah,
an exponential rate. Clearly, it's bullshit, right?
yeah,
So this then, and in no generation in human history has ever had to deal with social media.
yeah,
These kids are being shaped by a global toxic culture from the ages of 12, 13, that is constantly robbing them of any sense of self-esteem. That is shame. If you're a young boy, you're not validated, or young man until you have a certain amount of money, a certain job title, a certain house, certain this girl on your own. But of course, this is all total
Yep.
nonsense. Young females, you have to have Botox, you have to have lip fillers, you have to have weight loss, you have to have an ass until you look completely deformed, because there's just a massive industry that targets you, that makes you feel like you need to buy something to feel validated, that you need other people. This is so detrimental to
Yep.
development, and because every mistake has a massive negative consequence. And if you're afraid to make a mistake, that's why players develop at Brighton, Bournemouth much faster, because their mistakes don't are not faced with the same consequence. So you don't fear. It's what when I coach young kids, I'm like, I'll never criticize you for a mistake. You have to make them. You can't learn without them. They're a teacher.
Yep.
If you fear them, you won't learn from them. You'll just run from them. So this, you know, this extrapolates all the way to the top. There is nowhere you stop being human, and your brain is all of a sudden no longer subject to your biology, your physiology.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter.
Yep.
So, and I think, like, for these kids, it's very, very difficult to do, even in their personal life off the field. Everything has a camera. I mean, I'll sit and listen to Roy Keane tell all these brilliant stories about him partying and drinking and doing this and doing this. And then 20 seconds later, he said Marcus Rashford's a total disgrace for going to watch a basketball game. You have to make up your mind here, right? I mean, because one is he was a great player, but partying off the field was one thing. It was a disgrace, unacceptable. But I partied, it was great, but he's not allowed. I mean, sitting across from Wayne
Yeah.
Rooney, who called him a disgrace while Wayne Rooney was caught with this woman, that woman, getting pulled over by police, the woman in his car. And I'm like, lads, don't you realize the hypocrisy? And they're never dealt with social media. They were still allowed to make so many of those mistakes in private.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
So,
And look, I agree. I agree. And it's just we've spent a lot of time talking about it, but it's definitely just come to a head, I think, in the last few days and with some of the things today, because it just gets to me, and it's like I said before, we've on this, you know, someone can get chased out, and you say, oh, that's the end of it. We got rid of the influence.
of
No, you didn't. It's good. The next person will be targeted, and there
course.
will be another person. There will always be another enemy to target. There will always be another person that people will try to have you hate. People will try to have you focus on. There always will be, because that's the model. That's the goal. That's the intention of it. It's nothing more. And I
Mm.
just hope as a as like somehow I think there's more people become aware of it. It does help that more people become aware of what's going on, that there's more pushback on it, and there's more people who's going against it very often. Um, but I just think as a fan base, maybe it would help to influence things in the other direction a little bit of
Let me
like you
ask you
know
one question about Ruben Amorim, because
yeah
I've been thinking about this. You know, Amorim, his managerial career at Sporting, very, very successful, very few defeats, very rarely found himself in a high pressure situation where he's losing games and consecutive games, and he's having to deal with that and explain it and deal with his emotions in a way that he's being exposed to things that he himself has never had to deal with in his
yeah
career. And I remember the first month or something, he was really measured. He was like,
yeah
I don't react after games. I calm down, or you wait the next day. And then maybe the last 2 weeks, I've seen him react emotionally
yeah
and say things that I think he probably will regret.
yes
Like, to me, James, if I got another question about Marcus Rashford before the game yesterday, I
yep
would have turned around and deflected. How many more times do you need me to? Why? And as long as he keeps answering these questions the way he does, he's going to keep getting them. I really don't understand why he continues to feel the need to say things with a different set of words that he's been saying for a while, and what
yep
utility or value that has. And I almost feel like it's sort of what we're saying here, where you're looking for an outlet for your anger because it's uncomfortable. And sometimes it feels good to just oversimplify and just it's all this person's fault. It never is, of course. It's some of them,
yep
it's some, and I'm looking at that and going, it's interesting how he's responding to that environmental pressure and new experiences and new doubts about himself. Can he do it? Maybe it's natural to have self doubt, as he said. Yes, of course, I doubt myself. Everyone does. And I just, this is putting him under selection pressure in a way to do something, to respond in a certain way. I think it's interesting what it's provoking, what type of response it's provoking. How would you assess that?
Yeah, I do think so, and I think that's why I was saying earlier that I think he's kind of been put in a situation where he's probably violating some of his own principles to some degree, because I watched a lot of him at Sporting, and one of the things I again don't will say about this is, if I was the club, I would not let these questions continue.
I agree,
I would have kicked
100%.
him out a month
Thank you.
ago. I
Well,
would have
Jim,
said, no more
excellent point.
questions on this.
Excellent point. Just
Yeah,
sorry for my ADHD
yeah,
brain interrupting. That is also why I feel that there is a implicit consent
yes,
from United about the deluge of stories that are extremely
correct.
pernicious, and that
Yeah.
they have consented to this silently, and also are
Well,
happy to let that character assassination continue.
Well, I agree, and I also think what it does is it puts a new coach, a young coach, who this is really his only outlet of talking to fans, of
Mhm.
talking to people, puts him under the pressure of thinking, I'm supposed to answer this. Because that's the type of person he is. You kind of see that he's supposed to answer it, that he needs to answer it, that he needs to give this. Because otherwise, why are you letting him be asked that question? And that's where I said I feel that, again, the club, same as with the players, they don't they haven't protected him from it either. And to say, you're going to let you be constantly asked every week about Rashford from six different journalists, or the same one over and over and over again, who's going to write six different stories about it every time. And it's okay. Why not just say no? I mean, I watched a Sporting press conferences where the press officer said, we're not going to talk about that. And I'm like, I'm just saying, I'm just like, but I'm
Well,
not even blaming the press officer, because it's a club thing. It's like
let
it
me ask
comes
you
from
another
all
question on that.
around. And it's like, why not limit it?
Let me
Why
ask
not?
you
Why
another
why do
question
this?
on that.
Yeah.
If you're Cubby Mainu's people and
Yeah.
you're watching that, what do you think? I'm thinking, okay, this is a guy. My
Mhm.
client is a young academy graduate, and
Yep.
this is obviously permissible by the football
Mhm.
club. And I could see a situation where my client is being targeted. Is
Yep.
this how he's going to be treated by the manager and by the
Yep.
club? I would see that as an indicator of future behavior in a similar environment. That this is one of the reasons why you shut it down. And it's not, even if you loathe Marcus Rashford, it's about sending a message to, we will not allow this to happen to you. The
I
football club
agree.
will protect you. If you find yourself in a similar situation, we're going to. This is why you just cannot grow an atmosphere. United had all
Yep.
this protection under Ferguson. This is why you cannot grow an atmosphere,
Yep.
or a
An
winning environment
environment, a
until
culture.
all of
Yeah.
this gets addressed.
Yeah. I completely agree with you on that note. And I've made that point on the other side of it too, is like when you sit there and send abuse to someone like Rashford, or to another to another player, you're sending a message to other
Mhm.
players. You know, you can say, "Oh no, it's just that guy." What do you think other players think of that? Do you think they go, "Oh yeah, it's just that guy that I spend every day working with, that I look up to, that I admire"? Marcus Rashford, when he left, had kids commenting from the academy thanking him for shooting penalties with them, for practicing
Mhm.
with them, things like that, right? So you think they don't see this stuff? You think they don't react to this stuff? They don't
Of course.
understand it, and that's something that the club needs to really get a hold of as well, because it does have a knock-on effect of like, why would I want to go to that environment where this is permissible, where this is allowable? And I think it will have an effect on transfers, and I think it will have an effect on so many things, should this allowed to be continued. And I do think it's something that has to be at some point fully dealt with, or it becomes near impossible, because I'm not saying people are a product of their environment, but because I think people are their own people as well. But they're certainly affected by it, and it's impossible to grow a plant in the dark, and they just had to do something about it.
No doubt. Let me ask you quickly about Anthony Long. Uh, he man of the match first game, scored second game. Of course, he had a decent start to his United career.
Mm,
I'm no doubt that he will do well. Just to pick on something you mentioned earlier, I don't understand why United fans are so invested in players out on loan feeling and why they're angry. I mean, it's like
yeah.
whatever happened. I don't know. To me, I don't understand that. But Anthony, he's doing quite well, decent start.
Yep.
And I said on last week's show, I have to believe he's a much better player than what we've seen, which
Sure.
he probably is. Happy for him. Rashford had a decent cameo for Villa.
Yep.
You can see a
Yep.
bit of ring
Villa
rust
fans
there.
like him. Yeah.
Yeah. See, there's a
Mhm.
bit of ring rust there. I know he's not
Yep.
on loan, but Scott McTominay thriving in Naples. And I will talk a little bit about Jadon Sancho.
Mm.
Then you can just go through to them. Jadon Sancho posted this on Marcus Rashford's social media saying freedom, which to me put Rashford in a terrible position
Mhm.
because one, he has a couple of options. He can turn around and say, I don't like this. If he makes any type of public, opposition to Sancho's post, that's a massive story in itself. If he doesn't say anything, it implies he agrees, right? And or he can agree with it and make himself a massive enemy of Manchester
Yep.
United fans. So he has no ability to do anything on this. He's all three choices are bad.
Mhm.
And for Jadon Sancho, to me, I don't understand. I understand you're going to leave United, but why grow
Yeah.
weeds you have to pull? Like it just doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to me.
Yeah, it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary, and I don't think it really even has anything to do with performances either. Like whether Jadon Sancho's performing, not performing, it doesn't matter. It's completely unnecessary. And like you said, it puts Rashford in almost an impossible situation. I think ignoring it was probably the correct thing to do. In that sense, it's the easiest way for it to pass by and be forgotten. But it's just silly. It's just silly. And look, it's like it's just silly in general because there is that factor when we look at players going in different places. Some of them will have left because of their own fault. There's a balance of scales, some of it being the wrong place for them, some of it being on them, and it's always a mixture. And it's like, so just let it be. It didn't work out, at that point. And obviously, he probably has justifiable reasons to feel upset with United, but United surely also have justifiable reasons to feel upset with him. And at the end of the day, I think everybody just has to just let it go. I mean, Rashford made a point of saying when he leaves, he's not going to do something like that. He's not going to say nasty things about the club and all of that, and made a comment on that when he did that interview a while ago. And I think that's the right way. I mean, it would be the same as if if Anthony posted freedom after getting his man of the match thing, like it'd be stupid. It'd just be stupid. It'd be a stupid thing to do, which he didn't do, obviously, but like it would just be a stupid thing to do. And I think wholly unnecessary, and it's certainly not going to endear Sancho to anybody. Not that there are that many people still endeared with him at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it just to me, it just is something that you get no benefit from. Anything else, mate? We need to cover before we split.
No, obviously, I think the game against Tottenham at the weekend will
Mm.
be. I think it's very important that United perform well because that is a team that is flailing. Right, they got knocked out of the cup as well by Aston Villa. They're below United in the table. They have a lot of injuries. They're in a lot of ways somewhat reflective of us last season. I mean, they're really poor. They're having getting really poor results right now, even worse than ours. Um, and in some sense, I think Postecoglou, who's been there longer, be surprised if he's not under immense pressure at the moment. But everybody's beating them. They're not doing so well. I think it's a big one for United that it can't be a training exercise, like you said, in this one. I think they actually really quite need a result here, against Tottenham to yeah, I think it's important. You can't be worse than a team that's really doing poorly as well. That is really struggling at the moment. Um, and continue to feel very confident. I think it can be very damaging to everybody's confidence if they can't go there and do something.
Um, I agree. I think that Postecoglou is essentially dealing with what goes on at United. You've got a football club whose first principle is not winning trophies,
Yes.
and their morale gets sapped. But just my view on this, and just touching on something you were saying earlier, which is I don't understand. Um, Marine not so concerned about starting fast, getting early goals, when he said 2 weeks ago that we have to get the first goal, otherwise
Mm,
everything changes. So if we don't score first, the other team score first, then we're a whole different
yep.
whole different team. To me, to get confidence in that team, I would be looking to try to get score early if
Yes.
that is a very relevant defining factor on the outcome of the results. You can't play just your weaknesses.
Loosen the shackles a little bit here, I think would be a good
Yeah,
idea. Just a little bit, you know.
and
But also pick players who are gonna get you goals. I mean, like I said, I do think Garnacho should end up playing in that game off of the start. And I anyway, there's obviously selection things there, but I definitely think that's he's gonna have to balance it now. It's been long enough that obviously they're still gonna learn, they're still gonna get better and all that, but you got to balance it with a little bit more, I think, for everybody. Because the
yeah,
players lose confidence too. Obviously he said
massive.
that as well. They lose confidence. They don't believe if we're not winning. He's not stupid. He did admit that. Like if we lose too many games, the players. It's hard to learn in that way. When you're losing and losing and losing, you're
Impossible
not going to learn. You're not going to take it on board. So there's a balance to be struck there that I hope he can get right because I
Yeah,
think everybody needs it. Everybody needs a few wins like strung together to build that confidence up. And even though we beat Leicester, and even though we've actually won 6 out of the last 8, the losses have been really bad, I think, and the wins have been really squeaky at times. And so, we want
mhm.
to just improve it a bit because we know that they're capable of being a lot better than they are now.
Yeah, it's hard to trust, the how substantive this really is whenever it just still looks so fragile. It doesn't look like it's improving.
Yeah.
Um, and I really don't expect much between now and the end of the season. However, United should be putting all their focus on winning that Europa League. It would have a huge payoff at the end of the season. All right, mate, we'll go ahead and leave it there. We'll be back next week. At
Yes.
all living well, hoping the world, your civilization survives another week. But we'll be back next week. Thanks to all of you for downloading the podcast, for tuning in. Much appreciated. Much love to all of you. Take it easy. All the best, man.
See you later.